Good afternoon. This is Donna Cooper. I'm the Executive Director of Children First, and welcome to the Children First analysis of the Pennsylvania state budget. We kicked this off today in March Madness. Some of you are keenly watching the basketball tournament across the country. We're watching the tournament across the street here at the Capitol. Today, Governor Shapiro, Governor Shapiro, got to get that right now, people. He announced his budget today, and we thought since he did that in the first week of March, we'd tell you how the budget looked as it relates to the March Madness. Now, we're going to skip all the way to Final Four because we've got 4 teams we are supporting here at Children First as it relates to improving the lives of children. And those 4 teams are the K-12 team, how are our kids doing in public school, the early childhood team, are we investing enough in children under 5? Are we making sure our children are healthy and their well-being is met? And the final team, the team that is the vulnerable kids in the state, those who have been abused, neglected, or are otherwise in the juvenile justice system, right? So we got 4 teams we're looking out for, and we have the experts here with us today to give their analysis of what the governor's budget address tells us about these teams. Now, I want to tell you one piece of information that's really important about the governor's budget. Today, he proposed a budget that's about $45 billion. Sounds like a lot of money, and it is. And the question is, did that money get invested enough in kids? And what were the decisions made when that budget was put together? Now, in addition to having $45 billion, the other thing to keep in mind is that Pennsylvania's revenues are flush. We have a $11 billion budget surplus as we sit here today. And so we have a lot of options to make good decisions to benefit parents and children in the Commonwealth. And we're not quite sure, but we'll find out from our analysts whether those good decisions were made. I'll tell you one decision that kicked this off, and that is the decision about tax cuts that were proposed in this budget. Governor Shapiro kicked off his budget today saying how proud he was that he was and so he wants to accelerate corporate tax cuts. And that's going to reduce state revenues by at least $200 million this year and nearly $1 billion in the next several years. That's money that could be available to solve many of the challenges that children face. And so let's kick this off today about what else we learned in today's budget. We're going to start with early learning. We'll start with our youngest learners. So that's the team at the bottom there. So my MIXIC is Children First, Early Childhood Policy Director. And you've been around the block. You were a Head Start kid yourself. Your mom ran an early childhood program in your house. So you certainly have a lot of expertise to evaluate what the new governor did. So what did you hear today?
Well, Donna, I think the governor's proposal missed the winning shot. And why is that? It's because his proposal doesn't even come close to stemming the child care crisis that's going on right now. Across the state, we have 38,000 children sitting on a wait list, and 10,000 of those kids are right here in the Southeast. In addition to that, childcare teachers are making like $12.43 an hour. And in Delaware County, where the cost of living is higher, they're only making $12.94. So Governor Shapiro proposed $66.7 million to basically continue a policy that's been in place since last year. So what he did was he continued a policy to keep the reimbursement rate to childcare providers at the 60th percentile. And for the everyday person, that basically means they take what people can afford to pay, and then they say, we'll pay you 60% of that. And so there's no surprise that that kind of policy doesn't even come close to stemming this childcare crisis. So in order to have a winning early childhood education team, we need 4 players. 1, adequate wages for the workforce. 2, high quality programming. 3, access for parents. And 4, reimbursement rates that cover the cost of care. One last thing I'm going to talk about is the pre-K proposal. He proposed $33 million to increase the rate for pre-K providers and Head Start providers. But again, that doesn't come close to stemming the crisis. In fact, we know that 60% of children in the state of Pennsylvania don't have access to high quality pre-K programming. And so we are very disappointed this year.
Didn't I hear the governor say we need to give children the chance to climb up the ladder when he was speaking about pre-K? and you're saying there's 60% of the kids not in,
Yeah.
what would need to happen to change that?
Well, we put together a proposal that said that we needed $430 million to cover the cost of all 4 of those players, including increased access. And so in addition to 430 million for childcare, we would need 100 million for pre-K to increase access for those 60% of children that don't have.
So we need 100 million for pre-K and he proposed 33 million.
Yeah.
Right, so that's a big gap,
Right.
right?
And we need a 430 million for childcare and we only got 66.7.
Oh, man, that's interesting. We have such a big budget surplus. We have enough room to make business tax cuts. But businesses are saying they need workers
That's
and
right.
they can't find workers because there's not enough childcare.
That's right.
That's a mystery. Well, let's move on. We're going to talk to our next analyst and we're going to learn a little bit about, did we do any better when it comes to our schools? So this is Priyanka Kawa, our second analyst here, is our new K-12 policy director. So tell us what you learned about today.
Well, Donna, in K-12 education today, it's all about the context. This is not a normal year for K-12 education in Pennsylvania. Like you said before, we have a huge $11 to $12 billion surplus. And in addition to that, we are on the heels of a state court ruling that made national headlines, that Pennsylvania's state funding system is unconstitutional. So with all that in mind, we were really looking for a slam dunk for kids this year. What did we see? We did not quite get that slam dunk. So here's what we saw in Governor Shapiro's budget. We saw a $567 million proposed investment for basic education funding. That's the funding that goes to all 500 school districts in our state. And that sounds like a big number, 567 million. That is about a 7.8% increase from last year. Also sounds like a big number. But really what that means is it's just keeping up with inflation. So this is not a huge increase in our schools education funding. It's just keeping up with the status quo.
And I think that the governor's own budget document said that, right? That
That's right.
their school funding proposal was one to meet the basis of inflation and nothing more, right?
That's right. So we see this as a missed opportunity. An even bigger missed layup, if you will, is that Governor Shapiro did not propose continuing to invest in Level Up. So Level Up is a scheme in which 100 forest districts across Pennsylvania receive a double dose of funding. And this is one of the ways that last year and the year before, we saw some effort towards improving fairness in our school system. Just here in southeastern Pennsylvania, there are 9 school districts that would have qualified for Level Up funding. Those school districts serve 257,000 kids. And across our state, there are 100 school districts that qualified that serve about 400,000 kids, over half of whom are students of color. Those kids needed the funding and they still need the extra funding to receive a fair education. I mean, that's what the whole big court case was about that we've been talking about. So to see that this was not an item in the governor's proposed budget is a mystery, and again was a mislayout.
Wow.
However, it's not all so sad news. There are some bright spots here. So we have some fair play from a returning player called CTE.
Before you go there, I'm sorry, Priyanka. I want to ask you a question. And you know, when Level Up was passed, it supported 100 school districts. And I remember when that happened, and one Republican after another came to the rostrum to speak in favor of it being passed.
That's right.
And in the second year, it was also widely supported by Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate. So what do you think it would take to change that situation going forward? If the Shapiro administration left it off the table, can we get it back into the game?
Absolutely. This is just the beginning of the conversation. And so we hope to continue working with legislators. We encourage everyone to talk to their elected officials because this is an issue that we've seen can start to move the needle in the right direction for kids.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. So our returning player, career and technical education. deserves a little bit of spotlight too. So career and technical education is not a new idea. In fact, in the governor's speech today, he referenced how 2 decades ago, the state used to spend $200 million a year on career and technical education. However, today, only 6% of Pennsylvania students, high school students, are involved in career and technical education courses. And we're way behind our neighbors. All 6 of our neighboring states have higher rates than us, meaning that their high school students are more prepared to graduate high school and to continue in post-secondary and in career. So we really were excited to see that Governor Shapiro proposed investing $17 million this year in career and technical ed. We saw that this is another issue that has a lot of bipartisan support. And so we hope that we can get, by the time the budget is finalized, 10 times that investment, closer to $200 million invested in career and technical ed. It's a win-win for our students and for our businesses, and we would like to see a much higher investment there.
Great. What else did you hear?
Well, we heard a lot. Some of our strongest plays, I still haven't even mentioned them yet. So one of them is school meals. We were so happy to hear continued investment proposed by Governor Shapiro in universal school breakfast and increased eligibility for free and reduced lunch.
Slam dunk.
That's right. Kids can't learn when they're hungry, and so we are so happy to hear that that the state is likely to continue investing in school meals. And then lastly, we saw a little bit of a timeout on one topic, which is charter school reform. We hope that the governor and elected officials continue to bring this topic back up off the bench for the rest of the session.
Interesting. Well, before we go on, I believe we have one of our pro ball players in Pennsylvania with us today. Monica Taylor may be well known to Pennsylvanians who follow women's basketball. She's played in Europe, she's played in America, and we're so lucky that Monica is with us today. Now, many of you may know her as a pro ball player, but we also know her as the chair of the Delaware County Council. And we invited Monica to join us today, not just because she has great basketball prowess, but because she can also illuminate some of the issues in today's budget. So is Monica on the line?
I am.
Great to hear from you, Monica. So it's so terrific to have you here today. And I'd love to know your reaction to what you heard today in Governor Shapiro's budget.
Well, Donna, I think the governor started the ball down the court, and the state lawmakers are going to make sure we get what we need. I can tell you, after waiting for more than 2 years for my baby to get a spot in a child care center, this is a real red flag that even in a county as prosperous and populated as Delco, the child care crisis is in full force. Donna, investing more funding is an easy layup for state lawmakers. A recent poll of PA voters found that 98% of the citizens of the state want to see more state funding in childcare. I am counting on them to make that shot by building on what the governor's proposed today.
Oh, Monica, we join you in that. I want to thank you so much for giving us your courtside wisdom. Any other predictions about the Final Four for today?
Sure, Donna. I am the chair of the Delaware County Council, and from my courtside seat, I predict that the increase in funds for counties for mental health services is a slam dunk and something that must make it through the budget, and I believe it will.
Wow, that's great news. Monica, I hope we can work with you to make sure that happens, because when the counties get their mental health money, we know you'll help make sure that gets to children. So thank you very much. Well, keep on playing, keep on leading, and thank you for joining us today, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's exciting to have some courtside predictions. Now we're going to build right on that. We're going to stick with Delco. Some people in Pennsylvania will know the famous Rosemary Holt, who built the Delaware County Health Department single-handedly, with the support of the great county council in Delaware County. But Rosemary is our health policy director. And Rosemary, what do you see courtside today about the budget?
Well, there's a couple things. The first one I want to look at is really what happened last year in that last round, which was a $10 billion investment but with federal COVID relief dollars spearheaded really by our current new speaker, Joanna McClinton, not to be partisan, but you have to get it in there because she really, stepped up and made that shot. And so,
And tell us again exactly what that was for.
yeah, so the $10 million was an investment that allowed additional home remediation, taking lead out of homes, and also an investment in workforce development for lead remediation projects. So that investment really went out to key, about 15 counties across Pennsylvania received that money who were already HUD recipients. So that means they got money from the federal government.
So great. So how did the governor respond to the lead issue today?
Yeah, so Governor Shapiro definitely recognized the importance of children and lead poisoning, and particularly spotted it in our schools, which if you think about it, children should be going into healthy schools. And so he recognized that we need more investment. He invested $100 million per year for the next 5 years in ensuring that we have healthy environment in our schools. That means taking asbestos out of schools, taking lead out of schools, really making sure they're safe for children. So I think that was a real positive.
That's great.
Slam dunk for kids.
That's a lot of money, $500 million. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's really spectacular.
Yeah.
I mean, I know our schools need more than that, but that's a great start for the state. So what else is on? What do you, were there things missing that you wish the governor had said about that?
Sure. I mean, let's think about that every child should be screened for lead in Pennsylvania. And we had an opportunity last year to do that, but it didn't come through. They did make the slam dunk in the Pennsylvania legislature with Senate Bill 1522. So I think what we really have to do this year is look to improve those opportunities. When you look at that, lead was taken out of paint since 1978, and that we're still fighting this battle right now, it's really sad.
Yeah.
And so now we got to really work to make sure every child is screened for lead, that we have accessibility to all people who have lead paint in their house to get remediation, to get help, to get it tested in their homes. And that's where we really need to go in Pennsylvania.
Oh, great. So we'll be working on that, right?
Oh, yeah. So with the Lead Free Promise Project, which is a coalition of organizations across Pennsylvania that really are supporting and helping us do this, we are going to be very successful, I think, this year.
What else do we hear from Shapiro today?
Well, the other thing that we're looking at from Governor Shapiro is around mental health. And he has also invested again in our schools with another $100 million per year for the next 5 years in ensuring that there is counselors and mental health services in our schools. And it's a great first step. We know that this is what children need. Having it in our schools is a good first step because many schools don't have counselors or social workers. And so this helps a lot of children at least have access. But we know that at least 1 in 5 children, and probably more since COVID, have mental and emotional or behavioral health disorders that are not being treated right now.
So that sounds like a really good first step, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
That's a
great.
good first step.
Yeah. What the governor also sort of made a big, stand for parity. How does that affect this conversation? What does health parity mean?
Yeah, so when we're looking at health parity, it's ensuring that people have access through their insurance. So, some children have access to mental health services through Medicaid, but if you're on a private insurance, you may not be guaranteed that access. And that's a real disadvantage for many families in Pennsylvania. One is because if you're not sure if your child has mental health services in your insurance plan until you might need it.
Mhm.
And that's a terrible time to find out that you don't have
Wow.
services.
Yeah. So the governor's going to fight on that, you think?
Well, we hope so. I mean, we're going to encourage the governor and the legislature to really look at that, but he has promised to really work on mental health parity, and is instructing the Department of Human Services to include that in their insurance bills.
So I know the state budget provides money for kids on Medicaid and CHIP, and I think about 40% of the kids in the state are insured by those programs. And we have most of the kids insured, but who's not insured? I didn't hear anything about that today. And what do we need to do about it?
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't hear about the uninsured children, which is about 20,000 children we estimate in Pennsylvania who are not insured. And most of those children are from immigrant families. And they are here who may be undocumented or looking to become citizens, but are lacking insurance. And so those children, through a program that we call the Dream Care, we want those children to get insurance. And it's really a small amount of money that would be in the budget to ensure that all these children get the care that they need. And, you know, every child should have access to care.
We didn't hear much about that, but that would be a
No,
good
we
thing.
didn't hear about
Yeah,
that.
because these children are going to school with other kids, they could
Yeah.
become sick, they could get sick more easily. We
Right.
got a lot to do to make sure every kid's insured, so
Yeah.
this is really important.
Yeah.
So we'll have to work with the House and Senate to make that happen, right?
You can be
But-
sure we will.
I would say, you know, Josh Shapiro's father's a doctor, he'll probably lean in on this and help us, which would be a great thing.
Dream Care would be a great win. for
A big
Pennsylvania.
win, a big win. So, you know, in addition to kids who are undocumented being forgotten in this budget, I didn't hear much about kids who were in the foster care system or kids that got tangled up with the cops. Let me turn it to you, Stephanie Arbucino, our Vulnerable Youth Policy Director. What'd you hear in the budget today?
Well, unfortunately, Donna, child safety and well-being for those vulnerable populations didn't advance too far in this year's March Madness. This year's budget included a few curveballs, in other words, some missed opportunities to score for young people in the juvenile justice. and foster care system. Juvenile justice, we were hoping to hear about increased state investments in delinquency prevention and alternatives to juvenile detention. What are the stats around that? Research tells us that most youth are not on the path to adult crime, and over-involvement in that juvenile justice system can increase their likelihood of reoffending. We also know that most kids in the system have little or no prior history of delinquency, and they haven't committed felonies or offenses against other people, and they don't score as high risk to reoffend. But despite this, Donna, we did not see increased investments in juvenile diversion and alternatives. We did, however, see a $12.5 million increase to the budgets for the youth development centers and youth forestry centers, which are, in other words, jails for young people. Now, on the other hand, Donna,
You're not laughing because it's funny. These are the sad points, but we certainly have our dribbling motions delayed. We apologize to our viewers.
Now, on the other hand, Donna, violence prevention and indigent defense did put up some numbers today. With this budget proposal, Pennsylvania will no longer be one of the 2 states failing to allocate state funding to indigent defense. In Governor Shapiro's budget, $10 million would go to shoring up public defenders' offices to adequately support people who can't pay for their own legal defense. That's good news for kids caught up in the juvenile justice system. Governor's budget proposal also included a $75 million increase to violence prevention and intervention programs, specifically community-led programs focused on prevention of gun violence. That's also a win for kids and families.
So other activities that the governor did that affect these children? What about the kids in the foster care system?
When it comes to kids and families involved with the foster care system, we didn't see the scores that we hoped for. Almost 17,000 Pennsylvania children were in out-of-home placement last year, and over 200,000 families received in-home services. An increased state investment could enable the county children and youth service agencies to strengthen the team and bolster those community-based prevention services. We're really encouraging the legislature to make these kids and families a priority, ensure they have access to quality services that keep families together. For those kids who do go into foster care, help them be reunited with their families or find another forever home as timely as possible.
So we got a lot of work to do, right?
Yes, we do.
But that was, how much was the increase? 10 million
For which
for kids in the foster care system?
Yes, and it really made up for loss of COVID recovery dollars. It wasn't an increase overall.
So one of the things we see in the budget is, it seems like the Shapiro administration made an effort to plug the holes of the termination of COVID money. It seems like the Shapiro administration made an effort to compensate for inflation. But the big wins that we needed for the final 4 contenders have yet to come to fruition. We didn't see them happen in the budget. Now, for those of you who are listening today, March Madness starts today. We're going to win this tournament, and we're going to win this tournament with your help. Over the next few days, we're going to be sending you information about how you become an advocate so that you can advocate. You can pick your final 4 team, and you can work with us to make sure that team wins. And we're going to make sure all 4 of these team wins. We're not going to let tax cuts. We're not going to let the fear of deficits get in the way of the future of our children. And we invite you to join that fight so that the kids of Pennsylvania succeed and win this Final Four. Thank you very much for joining with us. and look out for our budget analysis coming out very soon.